Commission of National Inquiry as an independent and impartial body with the mandate to investigate events that led to resignation of Mr. Nasheed and the subsequent transfer of power to Dr. Wahid. The CONI, as it is known, is also mandated to investigate events from 14th January to 8th February to help to establish accountability for any human rights violations which may have taken place and thus set the groundwork for national reconciliation and dialogue. The CONI is currently conducting its work in complete independence from the executive and other branches of the government. Responding to domestic and international calls for the mechanism to be genuinely independent and impartial, the government has reached an agreement with the Commonwealth to better focus the scope of the inquiry, strengthen the powers of the Commission, and broaden its composition, with the participation of an international co-chair plus a nominee of former President Nasheed. Although the CONI is fully independent and thus not answerable to the government has nonetheless made clear its wishes that the process be completed expeditiously. The CONI is now expected to deliver its findings by the end of August. Upon taking office, President Wahid also published a roadmap containing a series of commitments designed to resolve challenges relating to governance, the judiciary, the social system, and to help bring calm and consolidate our fragile democracy. His commitments include the restoration of public confidence in democratic institutions by holding the rule of law, the establishment of a national unity government, adherence to the Constitution, respect for human rights, the continuation of efforts to reform the judiciary, the safeguarding of media freedom, and a commitment to free and fair elections in 2013. The government also agreed to hold all-party talks to try find solutions to current political problems through dialogue. The CONI, the roadmap, and the all-party talks are three key pillars of the government's attempt to respond to the events of 2012. During the course of the next 2 days, I will be pleased to discuss progress in implementing these pillars. Distinguished members of the committee, despite these steps, political tensions remain high in the country. However, efforts are being taken to encourage dialogue and build consensus on contentious issues, and as a result of these efforts, Maldivians have been able to enjoy their daily lives as normal. The day after his resignation, former President Nasheed claimed that he had been forced to resign. Since then, his supporters have been regularly protesting in Malé, the capital of the Maldives, and elsewhere. Often the protests have been far from peaceful. As we speak, protests are taking place in the capital Malé, which has seen the government ministers targeted. For example, last night, the gender minister's car was torched, which have seen 6 police officers seriously injured, and which have seen journalists receiving head wounds. Such violent protests are making normal life in the capital almost impossible. However, despite this, minimum force has been used and police are showing maximum restraint. Law enforcement agencies of the Maldives have been taking all required actions to ensure the safety and security of the citizens of the Maldives. Nevertheless, MDP activists continued to harass their fellow citizens by protesting on the streets at night and also during odd hours of the day. The government would like to make it clear that it opposes all acts of violence, and the protests that have been happening recently are violent in nature. Thus, the restrictions we have placed on them are in compliance with the domestic law, notably the regulation on freedom of assembly, and with international human rights law, in particular the ICCPR. The dispersal of crowds and the actions of law enforcement officials have been in accordance with the domestic law. Any allegations made regarding the use of excessive force on occasions such as with the events of 8th of February need to be ascertained by the relevant domestic mechanism. It is also within the legal and moral obligations of the law enforcement agencies to safeguard civilians during public protests and to ensure that individual acts within the boundaries of the peaceful assembly. Distinguished members of the committee, I would now like to offer a brief overview of Modi's progress in implementing our obligations under the ICCPR. The Modi acceded to ICCPR and its first optional protocol on the 19th September 2006. The ICCPR and its first optional protocol came into force for Modi's on 19 December 2006. The Modi's initial report under ICCPR was prepared in accordance with Article 40 of the Covenant, which is addressed by the core document submitted by Modi's, which covers from January 2007 to January 2010. We understand that there has been some uncertainty as to the written report represented by the Modi's, which is based on a common core document and a short treaty-specific document to be cross-referenced with the CCD. On this point, I would just say that the Modi's has adopted this approach in order to improve our treaty reporting performance, which has been characterized by significant delays. The Maldives is a small island developing state with very limited capacity to prepare reports under the 8 human rights conventions to which we are now party. I would also point out that the common core document and treaty-specific report were prepared with the support of the OHCHR, which stationed a human rights advisor in the Maldives to advise the government on this matter. Ladies and gentlemen, as I have mentioned, the Maldives adopted a new constitution in 2008, which is exemplary by international standards in area of human rights safeguards. Article 93 of the Constitution requires international legal instruments to be incorporated in international legislation for them to be applicable in the Maldives, meaning that international legal instruments, including those previously ratified, will now need to be supported by separate domestic legislation. Although this does not affect the legal obligation of the state, such legislation is needed to ensure full compliance with international standards within the country. For example, in order to bring anti-terrorism legislation more closely into line with the Maldives obligations under international human rights law, including the ICCPR, a new anti-terrorism bill was drafted in 2008. This bill is currently being reviewed by the Attorney General's office. Furthermore, a new penal code has also been drafted with international assistance, which, in the context of implementing the Maldives obligations under the ICCPR, will represent a significant improvement to the existing code. The new draft penal code has unfortunately been held up in the People Majlis for some years. This is a significant problem for the justice sector as a whole. The administration of President Dr. Mohammad Wahid Hassan hopes to see the new code ratified before the next election. The Maldives has also taken steps to implement the equality and non-discrimination. The Maldives has made progress on gender equality and the empowerment of women. The government of His Excellency President Mohammad Wahid Hassan has decided to again re-elevate gender equality issues to ministerial level, creating a new Minister of Gender, Family and Human Rights. This new ministry is responsible for equality and non-discrimination issues for all vulnerable population groups. The Maldives has national gender equality policy, which aims to promote substantive equality through a dual approach, mainstreaming in all areas and strategic action on empowerment and advancement in specific sectors. The country is also working on specific domestic legislation